We are excited to hear from our first remarkable speaker for this evening. A Tyndale University student will now share her conversion story with us. Let's give a warm welcome to Liana Gordon.
Hi, everybody. It's amazing to see so many people out in support of such an extremely important cause. Yet, while tomorrow we prepare to march the streets in peaceful yet firm protest of one of the largest modern-day violations of human rights and dignity, tonight the air is soaked in the heavy weight of grief. And yet, if I were to tell myself 6 years ago that I would be here doing this, I have no doubt that a younger me would look on in stupefied horror. To a 13-year-old who spent the majority of her time scrolling through radically pro-choice online forums, who regarded anti-choicers such as yourselves as the epitome of evil, it would serve as a shock to me to ascertain that I would one day be a speaker and activist against the very same choice I once hailed to be a fundamental human right. So allow me to shed some light by sharing my testimony on what may be for many of you a seeming area of confusion and hopelessness. My generation. My generation is a generation of love, tolerance, acceptance, and diversity. But it's also a generation that has drank the toxic poison of relativism. My generation, the generation so resistant to tradition, leaving the church in waves, is a generation that still attends the altar for worship. It's not that they have given up religion, but they have swapped their object of worship for a man-made idol. They bow down to the towering, resilient God of autonomy. Autonomy comes from two Greek words, auto meaning self, and nomos meaning law. The God of this age is one that is obsessed with the self. It defines all things, it denies all things, it transcends all things. It seems then that Protagoras' words spoken so long ago continue to influence an entire generation of people. Man is the measure of all things. I, too, once drank from the cup of autonomy. I, too, used to be enveloped in this view of human life, one that ultimately degraded it, likening it to nothing more than environment and biology. However, everything began to change for me during the middle of my high school career, when I began asking important questions about my life, my meaning, and my purpose. I remember feeling what seemed like a deep hole in my chest, an unfillable void of emptiness, sorrow, and despair. I was obsessed with death, and not in the way you might think. I was petrified of it. The idea of slipping into non-existence, of facing oblivion, began to touch every part of my waking life, like a slowly spreading cancer. Even if I enjoyed something, all that I was able to think about was the fact that ultimately, it didn't really matter. I'm reminded of a quaint little poem by Stephen Crane, which perfectly encapsulates the nihilism of our age. A man said to the universe, "Sir, I exist." However, replied the universe, that fact has not created in me a sense of obligation. I soon began to realize that when I asked myself the question, who am I? The consensus of modern-day academia would be obliged to reply that I am nothing more than an evolved primate, an amalgamation of molecules, a thinking sack of meat. So man may be the measure of all things in a godless universe, but he is nothing more than an accident of time, a blip in the cosmic story. But I read the Gospels for the first time in March 2020. During the pandemic, I was faced with having to answer for myself, who am I? And it was the first time I realized that I had never read the Bible, despite understanding myself to be a cultural Christian. It was then that I understood something monumental. Jesus, when he is standing with the disciples after feeding the 5,000, asks the people to say who he says he is. "But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say that I am?" To which the disciples replied, "You are the Messiah." In order to answer the question, who am I? You've got to first answer the question, who do you say Jesus is? If Christianity is true, you are his beloved creation. Yes, you are a sinner. Yes, you are lost in iniquity. But in Christ, you are washed. In Christ, you are made new. Suddenly, all the things that had confused me before began to make sense. That deep sense of longing I felt for meaning, for relationship, for purpose, wasn't just an illusion, or a lie, or a mistake of evolution. Augustine declared that our hearts are restless until they find their rest in God. Today, there is a generation of young people filled with restless hearts, such as my own only a couple of years ago. Today, we are not only warring against legislation or Supreme Courts, but against an overarching culture of death, one that fundamentally has redefined what it means to be a human being. And if we want to recover a true identity of what it means to be human, you have to look to the true man. And in him, and only in him, can you find true meaning. And that is in Jesus Christ. Thank you.